Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of the Greatness Movement podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Weiss. I'm a life coach, speaker, author, and founder of the Greatness Movement based here in Phoenix, where we guide you to be the greatest version of yourself. Well, last week, I think it's the most watched show, most listened to, most downloaded show I've ever done. The title of the show was what to do if you're in a sex-starved relationship. And maybe you missed last week's show, and if you did, I'm going to do a quick recap. This week, I wanted to get into the solutions if you find yourself in that situation. But we've all heard the standard reasons as to why somebody doesn't want to be intimate. Usually it's things around health, or they just have no interest, or work, or kids. All which are true. But there's an underlying cause to anyone who doesn't want to be intimate. And I discussed that last week. And the underlying cause is codependence and enmeshment. And I showed a dramatic example of how simply that gets created. I showed a show from a reality clip of a mother who has a 23-year-old son, and the son hasn't told her that he's dating this older woman, and she breaks down and basically blames him, says, when you don't tell me things like that, it makes me feel like I'm a bad mom. That's the origin of a sex-starved relationship. As crazy as that sounds, as I pointed out last week, and I really encourage you, go to my YouTube channel and pull up that show, or if you listen through Audible or Spreaker, one of those outlets, go to last week's show on the sex-starved relationship. And the reason a simple, parents say stuff like that all the time, and the reason that's so damaging is, like he said afterwards, he felt like a bad kid and he felt responsible. But that's exactly why her son won't tell him, because look at what happened. The second he got vulnerable, the second he opened up and shared who he authentically is, she completely belittled him. She made it all about her and how it was his job to make her feel like a good mom. In other words, she made her son responsible for the way she feels. That type of, as I talked about, that's a reverse umbilical cord. Our job as parents is to feed our kids. The umbilical cord goes one direction, not two directions. And this is what parents do all the time. They get that mixed up, and they expect their kids to make them feel good. And so what that 23-year-old is learning, and if you are the person in a relationship who's struggling to be intimate, or if you're with somebody, what happened to them in childhood is something just as simple as that. Now, normally it's much more severe. You have someone sick or hurt, and the child, feels totally responsible. I had someone in one of my greatness groups bring this topic up, talked about how there's a certain song that when it comes on the radio, she doesn't like it. And she noticed now her daughter is joining her. See, her daughter's trying to make her mom happy. And we discussed, are there other ways, in the parenting dynamic where her daughter doesn't feel like she can be herself? That's why she's trying to copy mom and agree with mom to get mom to like her. And that dropping of our authenticity, that's what creates a sex-starved partner, a partner who finds all kinds of what sound like very plausible reasons to not to be intimate. They're all defense mechanisms because of one or both parents basically siphoning off of their child emotionally. They're using them. This is really graphic, but it's really true. And for those of you who identify or seeing yourself in this, I don't mean this disparagingly, but this is literally what's happening. It's like an emotional tampon. Now, I don't say that to disparage you, but we're just not taught about how to deal with our emotions. And we're not taught how to be parents that don't turn to our kids and use them that way emotionally. We have to take responsibility as parents to go learn about this stuff. It's a responsibility we all have. And if you've never taken parenting class, if you're not reading about parenting, codependency, and enmeshment, honestly, you're being irresponsible. You're just flat out being an irresponsible parent. That's part of the job. We can blame the government or schools and say they should teach us this stuff. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe. I don't want to get into that debate. But the most important job we have in our life is being a parent. And most of you, I'm sure, have gone to college or taken, get your real estate exam. You study for things like that. Why aren't we studying? Why aren't we reading and being responsible about learning about these things? Why do we get defensive and think we don't have to learn because we learned from our parents and our parents weren't great? No, I'm sorry, they couldn't have been. Nobody's taught how any of this works. And just like the example I showed last week, most people think it's perfect parenting, and it's not. It's very damaging. And it's the whole reason, as I pointed out in the show last week, he's 23 years old. He's dating a 37-year-old woman. He's dating a mother because his mother didn't act like a mother. She used him emotionally. And so he's still looking for that supportive, caring mother. That's why he's dating an older woman. So this isn't to demean people as parents, but I am going to hold you accountable and hold you responsible. It is your job to go learn about this. If you're spending more time learning about your hobbies and taking painting classes and pottery classes or whatever it may be, and you're not reading and studying and learning how to be a parent who isn't codependent, doesn't enmesh with their children, you're being irresponsible. And that's, I want to try and say that as loving as I can, but it's just true. You're being irresponsible. And so I urge you to take responsibility and change that. Let's change that dynamic. I know there's a lot of fear and worry about admitting we're imperfect as parents and learning about this stuff. And I understand that fear and concern, but turn towards it. Instead of running from it and beating yourself up and going into denial, or denial mechanism doesn't want us to admit those truths, so we go the opposite direction, pause for a minute and go, wait a minute. Let's turn the other direction. Let's become experts in parenting dynamics, and let's not shame ourselves for it. Okay? So this week, that's the basic recap of last week. Please go back and watch last week's show if you missed it. And this show will make more sense to you. But that's the basic recap of what causes a partner in a relationship to not want to be sexual. So again, go back to YouTube, my YouTube channel, and pull up last week's show, The Sex Starved Relationship, if you missed it, so that this show makes more sense to you. So I'm going to give you solutions. What are solutions for the person who's afraid to be sexual and intimate, and what are solutions for the partner who's feeling rejected and neglected sexually and emotionally? Okay, so let's start first with the person who's struggling being intimate. The first thing is basic sex education. There's a misnomer. We've all been taught something wrong. We've ingrained in women that sex education to them means that sexual interest and desire comes before sexual arousal. In other words, the basic message is, unless a man does it right, unless he romances me, says it the right way, does all these things, she'll have no sexual interest. So I want to clear up that part of the female side. It's exactly the opposite. Our brain embodies sexual arousal comes from sexual activity. So if you're struggling with sexual arousal, even if you're a male, I wanted to point out the female side because we have sent this message to females that, you just can't be aroused sexually unless a man completely wines and dines you or behaves in some perfect fashion. And that's just not true. And men, there are men who really struggle sexually as well. And, they'll flip that and go, well, unless she comes in with lingerie or, all these other props, he can't be aroused. That's a fallacy as well. Sexual arousal comes from sexual activity. So to create sexual arousal, you have to be sexual. That's just the way it works. Okay. So I want to clear up that basic misnomer in sex education for both sides. The next thing is whether you're male or female, take responsibility. It's your responsibility. It's not your partner's responsibility to arouse you or act perfectly for intimacy to happen. If you're struggling being intimate and it's an issue with you and your partner, it's your job to deal with your side of the street. That's the only part you can control is yourself. And if you're feeling a lack of intimacy, it's up to you to address that. Well, how do you address that? Simple. Get into codependence recovery, because if you're asexual, you're what's called a love avoidant, a codependent love avoidant. Okay. If you go to CODA meetings, you'll learn a lot about codependency. I'm going to give you a list of books at the end, so please hang on. A bunch of reading material. Also for parenting stuff too. Like I said earlier, we have to take responsibility for this. So I'm going to give you other outside resources so you can start addressing the love avoidance, the enmeshment, the codependence that you experienced in childhood. And that's why you're struggling with intimacy in your life right now. Hire a counselor, a coach like myself who specializes in it. Those are all things you need to be responsible for. I was gonna say, go to a doctor, make sure there isn't anything wrong health-wise. But I would also see, this is what a lot of both men and women do, is they're looking for a magic pill, or the doctor to give them a reason why they aren't sexual. It becomes a crutch. Even the CDC estimates between 85 and 90% of all illness and disease, 85 to 90% of all illness and disease is the product of emotions that haven't been dealt with. That's why going to the doctor and getting a pill or whatever, you're just treating the symptoms, not the cause. There's ample evidence. I'm not going to dip into it. If you disagree with that, or that sounds crazy to you, send me a private email at kenny@thegreatnessmovement.com. I'll send you all the information where you can educate yourself and see that if you're struggling with your health, if that's the number one reason you're struggling with intimacy, what that tells me is you're struggling massively emotionally. The science is overwhelming on that fact. That's a fact. That's not Eastern voodoo opinion. Okay. So assuming you go through that and everything, what you really need to focus on is codependence recovery and your sexual avoidance. Okay. Like I said, I'm going to give you resources here in the back. The next thing you have to recognize is almost 70% of the entire population doesn't feel. If you ask them what their feelings are, they don't know. They'll say things like, I'm good, I'm okay, I'm fine. Those aren't feelings. They literally cannot attach to their body, okay? Especially the sexless partner, the avoidant. Because remember, they were smothered emotionally. And so they've learned to, it depends how severe it is, but literally dissociate out of their body so that they can't feel. So I'm going to give you some skills and tools here to get back into your body, because feeling for you is so scary and overwhelming. It's a defense mechanism for you, because childhood was so overwhelming emotionally. That's why over 70% of the population, or just under 70% of the population can't feel. That's a big reason why we struggle. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to show you, for those of you listening, you can't see this. The first thing for those of you watching, I'm going to show you a little exercise to learn to start basically reorienting. I'm not going to get into the brain and body chemistry of the different levels of our brain and all that stuff and why all this works. I'm going to leave the science out. Okay. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get your brain and body back online, because if you can't feel, there are two elements to the evolution of your brain that are no longer speaking and talking. They're shut down. And so your ability to feel your basic gut instincts and the feelings within your body no longer work. Okay? So I'm going to give you this simple exercise. What I want you to do is I want you to get a hand. I don't care if it's your right hand or left hand. And I want you to put it out in front of you, palm up. Okay? And then as slow as possible, I want you to curl your fingers in. I'm doing it kind of fast because I'm on a podcast here. I can't, do this for 30 minutes, but as slow as possible, I want you to slowly bring your fingers in to a fist. Okay? And as you're doing that, I want you to look at it and I want you to feel the sensation in your fingers. And then once you've made that fist and clenched really hard, and as you do that, feel your fingernails digging into your palm. All right. Then, done that for 5 seconds or so, I want you to release it and do the exact same thing, going incredibly slow, releasing your fingers back out until it's now your palm is flat. Okay. Once again. Now, after you've done that, I want, for those of you who are really struggling, do that twice with your eyes open as slow as possible, feeling as much as you can, okay? Then I want you to do it with your eyes closed. You're gonna see, and when you do it with your eyes closed, I want your whole focus to be on feeling every little tendon and joint and muscle and every bit of skin in your hand as it collapses in and then extends back out. You're going to notice a massive shift in your ability to feel and orient yourself once you close your eyes. I want you to do that for a week straight. Just do that exercise at least once a day for a week. For some of you, literally, this may sound crazy, but for some of you, that may cause sweating. That may cause heart palpitations. It may cause some shaking or trembling. You might even cry. Well, I'm telling you this not to say to expect it, but for some of you, you might notice some big sensations, okay? And I don't want you to be caught off guard by it. It's all very normal. It's those two pieces of your brain, brain and body, that have been offline. They're actually reprocessing through the trauma that helped you dissociate, okay? It's a very low level. None of it's overwhelming. Other things I'd do to help somebody in the office, I'd have to do in the office in case severe trauma came up. I'm not going to tell you what those are online. I don't. If somebody did it and they had a reaction and there's nobody there to help them through that, I'm not going to do that to somebody. But there are other ways that I help people get back in touch with their body. So if you notice this and then you decide you want to go get help from somebody, and maybe you decide to pick someone besides me, make darn sure they're an expert in body awareness and feelings, okay? Many therapists aren't. They just aren't. It's all talk therapy. This isn't talk work. To reconnect for a love avoidant codependent, there's some talking, but a lot of this is body work and being able to reconnect. And depending on the level of childhood imperfections, there could be a lot of hidden trauma that somebody's just not aware of. And so make sure you pick somebody who's good with trauma, and also somebody who knows how to connect the body again if you go looking for somebody to help you. Pardon me. So I want you to do that, to learn to reconnect to your body. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to go on Google and I want you to print off feelings list, or type it in. Type in feelings list. Tons of them will come up. Pick one that fits you. There should be an equal balance of positive and negative feelings in it. And I want you to print it off and I want you to keep it with you for a week. And 3 to 4 times a day, I want you to stop and just look at that list, both the positive and negative feelings. and see if you can start discerning between different feelings. Now, the key is, you're going to see there's a difference between frustration and perturbed. And the key is, when you see those words, what I want you to ask yourself is, where in my body do I feel that? And if it's excited, same thing. Can you even feel excitement? Many people can't. All right. So that for a week, same thing. I want you, and that you should be doing. If you're a love avoidant, you should be doing this for months, the feelings work, because you're so detached from your body and from being able to be intimate. There's so much fear around that. You need a lot of feelings work, a lot of reconnection. And this will be safe too, because see, you're not expressing any of this to anyone. You're doing it alone by yourself. Okay. The next thing I want you to work on is when you fight, or if you have a desire to fight or get critical of your partner, that's a sign you have unmet emotional needs. Because avoidants start fights and look to be critical so that they can create distance. So I want you to really pay attention to any sort of, most avoidants have lots of stored rage and anger. All right. And so if you find yourself wanting to fight or wanting to get critical, that's a sure sign you're an avoidant. And you have a lot of stuff, trauma in there that hasn't been dealt with, that you're dissociating from. You don't know how to process it or deal with it. So you create an external fight. You end up pushing it onto your partner to avoid the overwhelming nature of those feelings. So to combat that, I want you to sit down and I want you to make a list of your needs and wants. See, avoidants, they never could meet their needs and wants because they've always been meeting everyone else's. That was their job. And then they'll feel incredibly guilty if they ever pursue anything they want. That's another sign you're a love avoidant. If you feel tremendous guilt or even guilt, like again, go back and watch the show last week. This kid wasn't like, falling over with guilt, but he had guilt over not talking to his mom about his feelings. Well, that right there, that's transferred guilt. It's not his. He's feeling guilty because his mother's unmet needs were placed into him. So he feels bad for pursuing something that, at least in this moment, he thinks works for him. He thinks dating this older woman works for him because he'd have to do more work and then he'd see what the issue is. But at least for right now, he's feeling guilty for doing what he wants to do. And so if you're struggling with guilt, I want you to recognize right away, whoa, this is codependence. These are my mom and or dad's feelings that were placed into me. No, I refuse to be guilty. I refuse to feel it. It's okay for me to go pursue my own needs and wants and not always put everybody else first, or my job first, or my animals first, or my kids first, all those things. And then when the guilt comes up for pursuing yourself, I want you to recognize, nope, sorry, mom, sorry, dad, I'm not going to carry this for you anymore. The next thing the love avoidant needs to learn to do is how to say no. They never could, just like the kid on the video. And so what I want you to do I want you to make a list of all the people, places, and things you have a hard time saying no to. And then I want you to prioritize it. It's easiest to most difficult. And I want you to challenge yourself. If they're really simple, start saying no to that simple thing once a day. If they're more, some aren't so simple, then I want you to challenge yourself to start saying no to things once a week. All right. Learn to say no. The only way I started learning to say no by going to a restaurant. Waitress came up, asked if I wanted something to drink, and I said no. Literally broke out into a cold sweat. First time I ever remember saying no. If that's where you have to start, that's fine. Now, for many of you, it'll be very difficult to say no. So here's a buffer. Certain things I wasn't ready. I knew I needed to say no. I didn't have the self-esteem yet. I hadn't worked through the guilt. I didn't know my needs and wants yet. And so what I would say to people is, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. That created a buffer. That's a maybe. Well, think of it. When someone says something like that, we're not going to fight with them because we're like, oh, they'll say yes anyway. But that allowed me to go off, take an hour or two or a day or two, depending on what the question was, build up my self-esteem, build up my courage, and come back to them and go, I thought about it, and that just doesn't work for me. I could exercise my no. All right. So there's 2 ways to start learning how to say no. Now, as far as taking responsibility for your sex life and ownership of it, I'm going to give you some skills and tools. For the person who's struggling being intimate, it is your job to initiate. It has to be your job to face that internal codependence, enmeshment, and fear. And so I'm going to challenge you to every day say one thing you like about your partner. One affirmation. I love your eyes. I love how hard you work. I don't care what it is, but give them one affirmation a day, and you initiate it. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to share one feeling from your day. Today, I felt very frustrated at work when my boss walked in and handed me extra work that Joseph is supposed to be doing. Now, because of your fear of intimacy, I want you to ask your partner, I want you to put a contingency on it. Before you share that intimate feeling from the day, I want you to turn to your partner and say, look, I'd like to share something from my day, but I don't want any feedback. I just want to be heard. Okay? So you make that request and then you share a feeling, because remember, as a child, the avoidant was constantly made to take care of somebody. So that for them to express themselves, to hear feedback or something, it's like overwhelming to them. Please give them space. Let them just share a feeling without any expectation. They have enough fear already. Just let them learn to express themselves, okay? The other thing I want you to do is when you drive in the car, watch TV, I want you to initiate non-sexual physical touch, holding hands, arm around each other, running your fingers through their hair, rubbing their shoulder, something, or even maybe the best you can do is just place your hand on them. Start there. Start working through the fears of intimacy and connection. Place your hand on them and just feel the sensations going on in your body. If they're overwhelming, get with a professional. If they're not, just notice that. Let the arousal build, okay? Now, for those of you who work through that and get a little more advanced, once this starts clicking, maybe a month or 2 from now, this is a great exercise. I want the 2 of you to sit knee to knee, 2 chairs, both of your knees touching. And I want you to start off by looking at each other's right eye for about a minute or 2. Don't say anything. Just look at each other. If smiles come up, tears come up, don't say a word. Just look at each other's right eye. I want you to do that for 2 or 3 minutes. And then I want you to switch to the left eye. The left eye connects to the emotional side of our brain. You'll feel much safer staring right eye to right eye. Almost all the time when I do this with clients, left eye to left eye, the emotional connection that happens is absolutely beautiful. So when you get a little further along and that feels safer, I want you to try that. Okay, now for the partner who wants sex but can't have it, here's some solutions for you. Generally, you are recognized as what's called a love addict. In other words, you suffered from abandonment as a child. That's why you picked a love avoidant, because they're constantly abandoning you. Plus, you misconstrue that sex is love. I'm not going to get into the whole dynamics of love addiction. I've done previous videos on it. Please go to my YouTube channel, or if you're listening, scroll through Spreaker and iTunes and all that. I have shows on that if you want to learn more about love addiction. But one of the things you do because of your abandonment fears is when they start a fight or when they get dismissive of you, you pick up, it's called an intensity bomb. They're throwing all these intensity bombs at you to divert you from intimacy. Don't pick it up, please. When they act out in some way, when they push, you know what I'm talking about. They push your buttons in some way to start a fight or create distance. Don't bite. Stay quiet. Don't even notice it. Don't even notice it. All right? Not make them, help them learn. Because the reason they're starting that fight, they're creating that intensity bomb, is they have overwhelming emotions. This is their coping skill. By not picking up the fight, by not joining them, what you're doing is you're allowing them to experience the discomfort, and hopefully they'll go to some of these tools I've given. They'll start reconciling those uncomfortable emotions. The second you pick up the bomb and you argue back, you defend yourself, you try and fix the situation, boom, you've killed it. You've killed it. You've played right into their hand. Please stop. One of the best things to do is stop defending yourself. If they make some accusation, go, that's interesting. I remember it differently. Thanks for sharing. That's it. No more. Don't go, well, I did this and that. No. Stop. Now, what that's going to bring up in you is your abandonment fears, because you want that fight. Because at least when you're fighting, you don't feel empty and alone. That's the work you get to do. So not picking up the fight, not defending yourself, what that does is it allows both of you to deal with the overwhelming feelings, their feeling of fear of intimacy, your fear of abandonment. So you're both healing, okay? The other thing to do is when they're upset, ignore their words, because they can be incredibly slanderous, demeaning. Don't listen to those. Listen to the feelings, especially if they're demeaning. If they're demeaning to you, what they're telling you is their internal feelings about themselves. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how denial works. They're literally screaming how much pain they're in. And they say you're a stupid loser, how dumb, whatever it is. Maybe they don't scream and yell, maybe they're passive aggressive. Whatever way they do it, when all of that negativity comes out, I want you to recognize, oh my God, this is how much pain they're in. These are their feelings about themselves. That will make it much easier for you not to have to defend yourself, and then you can have empathy for how much pain they're in. Okay? Now, the other thing for you is you get needless and wantless. You expect them to be mind readers and figure everything out for you and meet your needs and wants. No, it's not their job. I don't care how many times you've told your partner that you like a goodbye kiss in the morning. If it's been a week, a month, 5 years, and you're still reminding them that you like a kiss in the morning, what does that tell you? It's not their need and want. And so to get upset with them that they're not meeting that is unrealistic. It's immature. It is your job to make a request for your needs and wants. So stop complaining. Just ask for it and celebrate when they give it to you. See, that's part of the problem on this side of the dynamic. This is part of why the love avoidant doesn't open up, is because when they do open up or when they do meet your needs and wants, so many times you don't recognize it. You diminish it, totally minimize it. You're not aware of the moments and times they are there for you, okay? That's because of your own abandonment needs. Just as they need to create a fight, to create distance, you need to not see their efforts so that you can continue feeling abandoned. Both sides do this, okay? So make direct requests to meet your needs and wants. Also, have a backup plan. It's not their job to meet it. And more often than not, they're an avoidant. They're not going to meet it. So make sure you have a backup plan. If you have a need for physical touch, schedule a massage at Massage Envy. It's your need, not theirs. Take care of yourself. Stop expecting them to do it. And don't use their intimacy against them. If I can leave you with one concrete thing, is when they do get intimate, whether it's physically, verbally, emotionally, whatever it is, don't throw it back in their face, especially later on when you get in a fight. Don't use those words and those intimate things they shared. Don't use them against them. That's what happened to them as a child. Just like the video I showed you last week. Remember what happened? Mom says, oh, we're so close. He tells me everything. He comes in, been dating an older woman for 6 months, finally tells her. Mom goes, well, I can't believe this. You not telling me things makes me think you're telling me I'm a bad mom. Boom. That's exactly what the love addict does to the love avoidant. The love avoidant finally gets vulnerable, finally gets intimate, and instead of celebrating it, the love addict throws it in their face, just like she did. She's a love addict. She's literally siphoning off of her son to feed herself emotionally. And that's what a love addict will do. They won't give recognition when the avoidant is actually available. All right, here are 3 keys for you. This will really help you because when you're on this side of the dynamic, the one wanting sex, you tend to be hyper vigilant, paying attention to everything. You know their whole life. You never forget anything while they're very forgetful. You're more neat. You tend to be more courteous. It's just true. So the 3 gets of Al-Anon. Okay, Al-Anon is for codependent people, of addicted people. It's a great thing for you to go to get support and learn how this works. The first thing is get off their back. In other words, quit paying so much attention to them. Remember, just like that mother, she paid so much attention to her son, he feels smothered. Well, you're doing the exact same thing. Quit watching every step they take, everything they do, going, wait, at 7:46, you should have been done at 7:42. Get off their back. Quit paying so much attention to everything they're doing. Get out of their way. Let them live the life they want. Okay? They get to choose it. You are not the arbiter. I know on this side tend to think you know what's best for them. You don't. It's their life. And especially since all their life they had to give away who they are to please somebody, when you're on their back trying to control the way they should live their life, of course they're going to push you away. And finally, get on with your own life. In other words, what happens with the person who wants sex is they tend to give up almost all of their pursuits to be with this person. They give away their life. Get back into your own life, your friends, your hobbies. Quit making them the sole focus of your life. So the 3 gets of Al-Anon: get off their back, get out of their way, get on with your own life. Also for you, same thing. Go get help with your own codependence and abandonment fears. All right, that's the basic solution list for everybody. Now I'm going to give you the real solution list. Both sides. This is mandatory reading. I say this in any show I talk about relationships. This book is by Pia Mellody, Piamellody. No person should ever go on a single date before they read this book. It's called Facing Love Addiction. Every single relationship out there has this dynamic in it. If your relationship struggles at all, you will find the answer in here. Literally, the whole world needs to read this book. This is the dynamic we've all been taught. It's destructive. It's the reason relationships fail more than 50% of the time, is because all we're ever seeking is love addiction, love avoidance. You'll read this book, it'll change your life. You go, oh my God, why the hell don't they teach this in high school? Like, I'm miserable, and I've been miserable in my dating life and married life for years. And if I just had read this, like, it's so simple to read too. 200 pages, big type. Like, you'll read it in a couple of hours and it'll completely transform your world. Mandatory reading. The next book, same author, Pia Mellody, Facing Codependence. This will start helping you see how the codependent created the love addict, the love avoidant, and how it showed up in your childhood as well. So you can see how codependent you are. And yes, we all are codependent. Nobody's immune from it. You'll see how you're doing it to your children. You're passing the disease of codependence down. The next one, I've recommended this before, Barbara Engel, The Emotionally Abusive Relationship. This, while that makes it sounds like it's about relationships, I recommend this because this is a great book to show you the codependent and enmeshed parenting dynamics you went through as a child. Everyone, over 80% of people think their childhood was perfect. It's impossible. None of us have been taught how to be a parent. All of our childhoods, we went through difficult things. and we all suffered trauma. And I know people don't like that word, and I get emails that I should use something softer, because people don't want to admit that and don't want to hear that. Well, you know what? We got to start calling things what they are. It's traumatic, but we've minimized, suppressed, and repressed it. We don't even know it, and we won't even call it what it is. And that's denial. And that's why politics and everything is the way it is because nobody's going to call it what it is. Well, I'm going to. It's time. Finally, the last book you need to read is my book, Your Journey to Success. The reason I suggest my book is this is all feeling based. My book is the most comprehensive book on the market that I have ever run across that will teach you how to reorient your feelings. Both sides need this. Both sides are struggling emotionally. Mine will give you not only why and where that comes from, but it's the most comprehensive book to show you how to change it. Okay? So there you go. There are your solutions for the sex-starved relationship. If there are any topics you want me to do a show on, please send me an email to kenny@thegreatnessmovement.com. If you're looking for help, one-on-one help, please send me an email, kenny@thegreatnessmovement.com. If you're struggling either as a love addict, love avoidant, codependence, or enmeshment, whether you saw this in your childhood or you fear you're passing it on to your children, or you're struggling with intimacy in your relationship, I can help with all of those. Also, for those of you who are interested, I have another greatness group starting this week, Thursday night, 7 p.m. It's only $99. We meet once a month. I only have 3 spots left. And send me an email, kenny@thegreatnessmovement.com. I can send you more information on that, where you'll overcome all of these topics and learn to live in the greatest version of yourself. Because you know what? The question, if you're sitting there, the question to ask yourself is it time? My turn? Like literally, is it my turn to take care of me and go figure this stuff out? If you think it is, the Greatness Group is for you. Send me an email, kenny@thegreatnessmovement.com. Remember, any show topics you want, I'm happy to do them. As I always say, whenever we judge, blame, or criticize somebody, the reason we do that is because we can see in them parts in ourselves we haven't reconciled, we haven't forgiven. You can't judge, blame, or criticize anybody unless you're doing the exact same behavior. You're actually seeing yourself, and that's what's keeping you from your greatness. Now, the opposite of that is true. When you see greatness in somebody, the only reason you can see it is because you have that greatness in yourself as well. If you're struggling being able to find that greatness or see that greatness in yourself, the Greatness Movement is for you. Please get in touch. Let us help you live in the greatest version of yourself. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
I can do anything. I can reach